Okay, in this one we're going to look at our session get method. We're going to retrieve items from the session. So as per usual, we'll write a quick test for this. This one should be fairly short, maybe not as short as the one where we tested if a key was in a session, but in a similar kind of range, I imagine. Choose high definition for the best viewing experience, and if you'd like to join a growing group of software developers and take your skills to a new level, all you need to do is subscribe, click the little notification icon, and welcome. So public function can check that or can retrieve an item from the session. Okay, and then our setup do something and make assertions. So I can probably paste this in, customize this a bit. So we are creating a session, we are starting a session, we shall actually set an item in the session, and we can use the same key and value again. What I would do is actually use something like that, because one can mean more than one thing in programming languages. It can also mean true, and so just to make sure that we are getting back an actual value which is set in the session and we're not just being told, yeah, something worked, just use like numbers which are quite obviously made up by us. Okay, so do something. We now need to get some items from the session. So we'll go happy path, and we'll also try and retrieve an item from the session which isn't in there. So session get, and we're going to get the auth ID, and then we'll store this in a variable called auth ID. And then what we'll do is we'll just say false item, and we'll just make up a false item. Okay, and then we just need to make assertions. What we'll do is we'll say this assert equals, and we'll say 678, and we're looking at auth ID. And then what for this one, if the item isn't in the session, we just want it to return null, and so we can say this assert null and then false item. So false item should be null. Let's now go and run our test. So we can remove this and rename the test. I'll just grab the name of it, paste that in there. Okay, failed asserting that null matches expected 678. And the reason for that is that we are not getting anything back from the get method as yet because we don't have any code in there. So let's go over to our session and we'll do this now. So the first thing we're going to do is actually check that the session has the key. So if this has key, we shall just return it. Return session key. Okay, fairly straightforward. If that key exists in the session, then just return us the value for that key from the session. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we are just going to return null. Okay, and so in this current state, our test should pass. And I'm just going to specify here that we're going to do a mixed return. So it could be mixed data types, could be strings, could be arrays, could be numbers, or it could be null. So let's go and run this test, and we should see a passing green test. One test, two assertions. So what did we assert? We asserted that 678 matches the auth ID because that was found, and we asserted that false item is null because that wasn't found. Okay, we could leave it there. That's pretty good. What you will see, and what is a pretty cool little thing to implement, is to actually set a default. So we can actually, without changing this test, still make it pass, but by adding an option for a default value, meaning if this key isn't found, or if this key isn't found in the session, and therefore no value will be returned, instead of just returning null, we can say, okay, if you don't find that, here's a default value, use this instead. So we'll give that a default value of null, meaning that all we need to do is return default, and this means that if the item is found, it'll work exactly the same and it'll return that. However, if the key isn't found, it will return the default, but we're saying that the default, unless we tell it, unless we give it a value, we're saying use null. So our test should pass exactly the same. We should get 678 for this, and we should get null for this because we are not specifying a default ourselves. Let's go and run this. One test, two assertions. So there's one other thing we need to test here. We need to test that if we do provide a default value other than null, that is what gets returned. So let's go and do that now, and we shall just call this retrieved default. Retrieved default equals, I'll just grab this here. Okay, so again we're going to look for false item. However, we're going to provide it a default in case this is not found. Okay, just use this. So, and then we will make it blatantly obvious that this is a default that we have provided, and so that is called retrieve default. Let's copy that, and we'll go and add another test. So in fact that's not the one we want. We'll go and copy that one, and then assert equals retrieve default, and then retrieved default. Okay, this should pass. Just to reiterate, what we're doing here is we're looking for this false item key in the session. If we don't find that, then just give us back this. Okay, let's go and run this. And so we get one test, three assertions. Hopefully that was fairly straightforward to understand. What happened was we didn't find this in the session, so we instead used the default and just returned that. Okay, great stuff. Let's see what else we need to cover in this one. We've done start, we've done is started, we have done has, we have done get, we have done set. So we need to be able to clear all items out of a session, and we still need to be able to remove items for a particular key from the session. If you've enjoyed this video and you'd like YouTube to show you more of my content, all you need to do is subscribe and click the little notification icon. I release new recordings every few days. Details of my schedule can be found on the community tab of my YouTube channel homepage.